Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this call meeting. It's a joint workshop between the City of Rockport and Aransas County Commissioners Court. Thank you for being here. We will have a roll call for City of Rockport and for county to establish presence of a quorum or not. Since there's no action being taken, it doesn't have to be, but we'll call for a roll call. Ward 1, Ward 2 not present. Ward 3?
Here.
Ward 4?
Here.
We do have a quorum, mayor present, so we have 4 members present.
Commissioner Cheney is absent. Commissioner Castelline is absent. Commissioner Rosseau?
Here.
Commissioner Dupnik?
Here.
Judge Garza?
Here, we've got 3 out of 5.
Thank you. Would you join us for Pledge of Allegiance to both the state and the United States flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Have a seat. First item on the agenda is citizens to be heard. I have 2 folks who have turned in cards to speak. First, Mr. Andrew Kane.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Judge, Officials. Andrew Kane, 2106 Lakeview Drive. At the last meeting, some of y'all weren't here, but I talked about at a workshop we had a little over a year ago, the city staff asked for a moratorium. And everybody on the staff had quotes, so I quoted them out in the last meeting. About how we slow down growth, we need to increase our impact fees because we can't afford this. We had water concerns and slowing the growth down. So a year ago, this whole council agreed on we got to slow the growth down and we got to get impact fees up so we can take care of our needs for the city's infrastructure. Judge Garza, I cannot even believe you're entertaining this TERS. You voted against the last TERS that you could have a logical argument for the public benefits of that last TERS, public space, parks, walkways, access to the water. This is like a TERS because they want 80% of the property taxes for 22 years. But what's the public benefit? This land's not blighted. You're against that TERS, this TERS has no benefits. I can't even believe you're entertaining it. What this does in our market, it creates an unfair competitive advantage. What this bill is basically asking for is $40,000 per lot be paid for from property taxes over the next 22 years by him getting 80%. So he wants basically a little over $40,000 per lot. D.R. Horton and Al Hogan are successfully building houses here. They're not getting $40,000 a lot. But you do this, he's got a competitive advantage on selling his houses faster than any other company for profit. If I'm selling my house in that $200,000 to $350,000 range, this puts me at a disadvantage because he's got a $40,000 system kick in into his investment, so he can sell for less. It's creating winners and losers. It's like a TERS, but I guess it's a developer agreement, so it's really confusing, but where's the blighted land? Last night, City Council approved a guy wanting a variance. He's building 115 homes, I think, on 36 acres and hoping to build $200,000 houses. But he's not asking for any $6, $7 million property taxes, 80% for the next 80 years, and he can somehow bring affordable housing or obtainable housing to us. So why would we do this for this developer? When we did the TERS, we talked about it. I sat here many times at both your places and said, why would any developer, these are quotes from months ago, why would any developer ever come here again like they have since the history of time when it developed and not ask y'all to pay for the development costs like they're used to? Because once you start giving TERS away, here they come. We've got one already quickly asking for something that's never been asked for before. There's another one coming who's going to ask for his project to be 100% off the tax rolls for life. That's the next one we're going to hear about. There's a lot coming, and I don't know why the citizens, you feel you need to use citizen money to hope we can create some attainable housing for certain people. What's the government's position on using my taxpayer dollars to give $40,000 to each house in hopes that a teacher or a government worker or a first-time home buyer is going to get it? We have no control. They do get it. I just want y'all to be careful what you're doing, because every time you take one step down the road, you're taking another step down the road and the next step down the road. In both your budgets,
are stretched. My tax is, what, 27% you did that one year? You have 53% in 3 years? The city can't afford this. We've got other problems with our budgets and our finances that we can't afford to give 80% of our property taxes off a new subdivision for 22 years back to the developer. I built my house. Where's my 80% for 22 years? I pay my taxes, and they should too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Second one I have is Mr. Jeff Hutt. For the benefit of those of you that don't speak to the council meetings and so forth, I did not read the thing about citizens to be heard. Both these gentlemen have spoken to us before. Let me read this little caption right quick, Jeff, before you start. Speaker participation instructions are provided in writing beginning the agenda. Texas Open Meetings Act permits a member of the public, a member of the governmental body to raise a subject that has not been included in notice of the meeting. However, any discussion of the subject must be limited to a proposal to place the subject on the agenda for a future meeting, and any response to a question posed by the city council is limited to either a statement of specific factual information or a recital of existing policy. Thank you, Mr. Hutt.
Please, sir. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you for having these workshops. I do believe in radical transparency, and one thing I've learned in my current job is that radical transparency gives you better judgment. And without that sort of transparency, you don't have the information you need. Personally, before this, I'd like to say thank you to the 4 people here. Like, all these meetings interrupt their lives, and they have, like, these guys are the 9-to-5ers here. So I appreciate for what y'all do and the time that y'all take. Dear Aransas County Commissioners Court and City of Rockport, I request that the Commissioners Court and city officials require Lynn Engineering to submit an existing example of a proposed project for proof of concept in the state of Texas before entering into any tax abatement agreements with a contractor. It is crucial that local taxpayers assure the project's viability and benefits prior to shouldering the infrastructure cost. I request the following information be provided along with the proof of concept example. This is so y'all can judge it better. 1, the specific tax abatements, a list of Texas tax abatement state statutes used in these past projects in the example, provide copies of the contracts, the resolutions, the ordinance, market viability and target home buyers. Provide that prove that the proposed affordable housing contract will attract qualified buyers who will maintain long-term residency. Provide a clear description of the target demographic for this project, including the specific industry sectors, employment categories, and salary ranges of the potential buyers. Track record and capability. Demonstrate by providing letters of recommendation from county judges and mayors a history of successful partnerships with local governments, showing positive outcomes for both the community and the developers. Impact on government budgets and homeowner property tax input. Provide examples of the economic impact the project will have on local government budgets. Provide clear evidence that the project will not result in increased property taxes for current homeowners, as this could cause financial strain on existing residents. I do believe this part could just be done by giving, how the tax rate went afterwards and what the budgets of the entities look like. Neighborhood composition and stability. Detail the composition of the example neighborhood program in Texas. This should include the makeup of original owners, second buyers, and rental properties within these neighborhoods. Demonstrate how the development will promote long-term home ownership and prevent excessive turnover and instability. Crime and safety. Provide a 5-year history of crime statistics within or around similar projects, illustrating the safety and stability of the neighborhoods following similar affordable housing projects. And 7, public services impact, public service impact. Present a detailed breakdown of the water and sewage services burden for the neighborhood. Demonstrate how the product will minimize its burden on local infrastructures. As elected officials, you're entrusted with safeguarding taxpayer interest, quality of life issues for us. It is your obligation to ensure that these critical questions are thoroughly answered before proceeding in any tax abatement agreement, not only this one, but going into the future. This due diligence is essential to make informed decisions that will benefit both the community and its residents in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutt. Next item on the agenda, items of discussion, possible direction, attainable housing for the community, Judge Garza. Okay.
I have one from Patrick Kane, and yes, since he cannot be here, if I could read it into the record. So, Patrick Kane, 1123 East Cedar Street, Rockport. There is no question we need attainable housing for our first responders, teachers, and local workers. The question is, how do you help make that happen? There are multiple ways to do so, including approving higher density developments, allowing accessory use dwellings, and divesting unneeded city and county land holdings to allow infill. None of these actions requires taxpayers to subsidize attainable housing developments. In the last 7 months, the city approved 224 single-family homes in higher density developments for attainable housing. These projects include, number 1, 41 homes approved on August 27, 2024 by rezoning commercial property to R2 as part of Kokomo Phase 6. Number 2, 68 homes approved on January 14th by rezoning the Oasis from short-term rentals to residential. And number 3, 115 homes initially approved last night by rezoning 36 acres off Market Street from R1 to R2. In the county's domain, let's not forget the over 400 attainable home sites at the reserve on Copano Bay. With over 600 new attainable housing units continuing online, do we need to rush to add more, especially at a $6.6 million cost to the taxpayers? Definitely not. Today's offer by Lynn Development doesn't even make sense financially given last night's developer request. That developer doesn't need a tax subsidy to build single-family homes that are attainable, hopefully in the $200,000 range, as stated in the March 3rd Planning and Zoning meeting. They are also building 30% fewer homes on a larger tract of land, paying for a wastewater substation that will benefit the whole area, and they're still turning a profit. So why can't Lynn Development do the same instead of asking for a $40,396 per lot tax subsidy for homes priced from $250,000 to $350,000? The city and county should first explore no-cost solutions to attainable housing before handing out tax dollars to private for-profit companies. Start with less restrictions on accessory use dwellings, divesting unneeded property, considering concessions from developers towards an attainable housing fund, and keep approving the rezoning request to allow for higher density developments.
All right. And then Ms. Kristin Underwood.
Mr. Lynn stated that he is designing this to provide attainable homes for the local essential workers. I am one of those essential workers. I do work for the county. I live on Kelly Lane, which looks to be going to be the main entrance to the subdivision. Kelly Lane is currently a dead-end street. At 163 homes, an average of 2 vehicles per home, that will be at least 326 plus vehicles every day driving past my home. My property is 40 foot from the street. So this is going to be a lot of traffic and a lot of undue noise. And my home will probably become unsellable. Nobody's gonna want that kind of traffic right in front of their home. The main entrance, I believe, should be changed to the South Burton side, which is already considered one of the entrances. There's the multitude of streets that are 100 foot wide, 16 of them to be exact, that could funnel this traffic, all of these vehicles in and out. It could lead to them to Market Street, Business 35, and also to Corpus Christi Street. There's also an easement that is next to Caroline's Resale. That could be the second entrance or exit. There's a couple properties to the backside of that easement on the south end that are landlocked. They probably would like to have access to their property. At $250,000 to $350,000, I don't believe these is attainable housing for the majority of Rockport and the Aransas County residents. Add in the Texas windstorm, homeowners insurance, and taxes, that's even more on top of just your typical house payment. I don't want to have the 80% of tax dollars coming from this subdivision to leave the community for the next 25 years. We need to keep those tax dollars here. I believe that there are other options than this subdivision and what Mr. Lynn is asking for. Thank you.
I was gonna flip-flop item number 2 and item number 1. So we're just gonna start with item number 2, and that's Mr. Stewart, Lynn.
Good afternoon. Appreciate the time today, and some of this is going to be a little bit repeat, but in interest of some people just want to kind of go over it again. I want to address some of the things. I appreciate all the citizens' concerns. At the end of the day, we want to be transparent, as mentioned, and we're not trying to do anything that's not the best for the community. As I stated last time, I came here in 2009. Born and raised in Matagorda County, an hour and a half from here, engineer by trade, and I made a commitment that if I could start a business, 10% would go to the widows, orphans, and needy. That's how I really started my business 15 years ago. Bought a business here in Rockport. I had no idea what I was doing. Came here and a few of the locals, local lumber company here, and Al, they all helped me out, and so I'm tied to this community, and I enjoy it. At the end of the day, we want to do what's best for the community. Now, this is not what's best. No harm, no foul. It's not a big deal, but I do want to address a few things because, again, if you have all the information, you make a good decision, whatever it is, we can all live with the decision. First thing, the $200,000 house. I just met with that guy because I'm going to be involved somewhat in that project. The house itself is going to cost $200,000. The infrastructure is going to cost about $45,000. They're going to sell the lot for $70,000. So that house that they talked about for $200,000, that's just what it costs to build the house. That's no profit, no nothing. So you're looking at $350,000 to $400,000 on a 900 to 1,000 square foot house. That's comparing apples and oranges. Another thing, talking about, for one, the proposed other projects, we're doing this in Plashes. I'll be more than happy to give you all the information, the mayor, the council. We literally did this 3 years ago. And like yourself, there's a lot of questions and people didn't know what we're trying to do. Again, we wanted to make a difference in the small community in Plashes of 5,000 people, so we did this. So we're more than happy to get that information to you guys. Another thing that's thrown a lot is the tax abatements. These increase in taxes only for this particular area. No one else outside the area is paying for any of this, and it is a $40,000 potential rebate if we build at 210, but that's over a period of 20 years. If you do that in any financial calculator, you're talking about a 10% or so return. It's not, in the whole scheme of things, it's not a whole lot of money. It's not a reason why I'm doing this. I'm not getting $40,000 back over 20 years does not make good financial sense. So the biggest thing, and I appreciate the Kelly Lane, I put that on Kelly Lane in the beginning because that was the only road that had access. I was able to get with the previous owner next to the dollar store, and he granted us a 50-foot easement. So that the main entrance will go right next to the dollar store, which I think is a much better entrance anyway. And so there will be not an entrance, not an exit, nothing will go down Kelly Lane. So that will take care of that. With that, just want to go over a few things. When we talked last, there was a few concerns. One was, how could you try to keep having just tons of investors coming in and investing, and this not being attainable housing, it'd be more of an investment type community. So I want to speak a little bit about that, and then also talk about what wanted some more details as far as what the reimbursement would look like. And so with that, I'd like to just kind of go over some of this, and I'm not the best at this, so there we go. So as I mentioned, I'm Stuart Lynn, came here in Rockport 2009, 10, so 14, 15 years ago. One thing that we pride ourselves on, I'm an engineer by trade, so yes, I fell in love with development because they're truly making a difference, and you have a bit of the engineering component and construction component and also development, so we can mitigate our risk and have opportunities to do this. A typical developer can't always do this because, again, the margins are very, very thin. And literally the only reason we're doing this is I started this business here in Rockport. Brandy's been working with me since pretty much the very beginning. She's on quite a few of the committees, met with Jeff. They said the housing study said they needed attainable housing, and so here we are. So at the end of the day, I'm not here trying to promote this to make a bunch of money. I'm trying to be part of the solution, and if we are, that's great, and if we're not, that's great too. Mission and vision, we talked about that last time. Our unique advantage is a little bit low, so you can't really see it. But again, as I discussed, we're not just an engineer by trade. We're engineering, do development, and also construction. So we can do all of those pretty much in-house, have a few subs, but we do so much work in other areas, we're able to bring those subs here to save a little money where we can. Project overview, that's the project there. It's again right behind the dollar store on Market Street, about 33 acres. Looking at doing 1,200 to 1,700 square foot. I think the lowest square footage on the house we have is 1,183, so just slightly under 1,200 square feet. And about 163 lots is what we're looking at right now. This is the just the very conceptual layout that we use just to run the numbers. And as you can see, that entrance does show on Kelly Lane. That'll be moved, let's see, north, it'll be moved east. So we're directly behind the dollar store. So there will be no access to Kelly Lane on there. And then we'll have an exit, as mentioned over there on the top right-hand corner. Again, we talked about all this, and it's been mentioned. This is for the essential worker. This is for the local, whether it's city, county type worker, teachers, any of those. And again, the same thing we've done in Palacios, and more importantly in Bay City, is we offered some incentive, and we actually donated some money. Each lot we sold, we donated to the school district there for the teacher fund to help decorate their classrooms and those things. So obviously we do something similar to that. The big thing I want to spend a few minutes on, and then want to open up to any and all questions, is some of the issues that we talked about last time. And this is one. And obviously you don't have to do all of these, but these are some good, in our research, some ways that you can kind of mitigate having a bunch of investors in these. And that's on, I'm not sure what page it is in your packet, but it's here, assuring resident home ownership. And we probably wouldn't do all of these, but we could definitely do some, and it would be part of the agreement. We would not, y'all would not sign an agreement until these were set in stone. And I can read them much easier, so let me open this up so I can read. But one, resident first, new homeowner required to occupy a home for at least 2 years before they're eligible for rental. That's one of the things. And some of these can be in the CCR, some can be in the HOA documents, some can be part of the deed. Another thing, additional monthly dues. There's something they do in some communities. They charge extra if you're renting the house. So here, $200 rental is one that we found. Mandatory adherence to the HOA's rental maintenance schedule. So if you're going to rent the house, you have to pay a certain fee to the HOA, which is to make sure that the yard's maintained, everything's done properly, and you're not investing in a house and just living 3 states away and just letting it go. A few others, annual rental license requirement from the HOA board for all new and existing. One couple down from that, have a set amount where you can only have 20% of the entire subdivision can be rental. And once you reach that max number, you can't give any more permits to have rentals. And then once that drops and someone sells it and it's a full-time buyer, well then maybe one or two or more, whatever, can start renting. But that's one that we found also. Another 6-month occupancy or vacancy mandate before a home can be rented. So you can have it to where if it was vacant for 6 months, they moved away and got another job and it was literally vacant for 6 months, well then it can go into a rental pool. But until it's vacant for 6 months, which means they have to have some type of, not a hardship so much, but they got to have a real reason to want to invest, to rent it out. And then the last one has some strict HOA approval requirements for all rental agreements. So again, you probably wouldn't do all of those, but you could cherry pick a few that make the biggest impact and use those as part of your HOA, your CCRs, and your deed. And so again, it doesn't do us any advantage to sell to investors. So whatever we can do that makes sense, we're definitely open to that. Next page, these are some two very specific ones that we've done exactly. The Valor Park is actually a TERS. The Pelican Place is 100% a 380 agreement, which in your case is a little better that you're doing, could potentially do a 380 and a 381. Pelican Place is 100% funded by the 380, so the county's not putting in, so the cities, their increase in ad valorem taxes still 80%, just as we're proposing here, is going towards payback for the infrastructure. But the city, in that case, is 100% of that 80% is going to payback versus having a county component as well, which helps both because now you aren't funding it 100%. Part of your 80% is not all alone. Lastly, again, Pelican Place, these are some actual houses that we're doing there in Pelican and Palacios. We started that project at 70 lots, and we're right about in the high 20s right now. Did an open house and had a few, we're looking at doing the same thing in Point Comfort, and some of the mayor and one of the councilmen went down and visited that. I know it's a little far for y'all to drive down to Palacios, but we'd be more than happy to show you that property as well and give you any of the context that we have for that. And then the last thing, we updated. Did we update the existing home for sale again like we did last time? So this is the third iteration. If you remember, if you'll go to existing homes for sale, it's probably 2 more slides, I think, from, oh, I'm doing it. Right here. As I mentioned, when we first met with Jeffrey 2 meetings ago, we had this here. We updated it last time, and now here's another update. Each time we do this, we just go on the HAR and just see to make sure there is a market for it. The last thing we want to do is come up here and push something that really isn't something that is required or needed. These are, as of probably in the last week, if not early this week, what is on the MLS in this price range that we're talking about. So as you can see, most all of them that are on there are sold. There is one that's $133 a square foot. It was built in 1965. The other one built in 1980. Price just dropped. It was $265. They dropped it to $249. And thank you. And then there's 2 of them there at the very bottom that are slightly over $210 a square foot, which is what we're proposing to be. They were built in 1999 and 2011. So that is most recent as of a few days ago. The other we talked about, it's the infrastructure. Our estimated costs are 6.5 to do the 115 lots, somewhere around 40 to 45. I think it's 45,000 a lot. And what spend a few minutes talking about this, and then I will be done and open up the questions. Our proposal is building it for $210 a square foot. We can do that and not go in the hole, make a little bit of money, and if we develop this fast enough with having a proper building in the time frame allotted, we can get part of that back through the 380 and 381. And so just a quick example, here is, I'll spend a little bit here. In this case, in a 380, and if we had a 380 and a 381 and 80% of it went to pay back the infrastructure, you're looking at, I think, 22 years is whenever it would fully pay back that investment. So it's not something that's gonna get back right away, and that's only provided that we finish this out in 5 years. And so in talking to the county judge and the city manager, it was important to have some stipulations to where we're not just coming in and saying, okay, we wanna build a bunch of houses, and if it takes us 20 years to build them, we wanna get money back on it. That's not our, what we're willing to do is have a 5-year development period. We develop it for 5 years, and if we only sell 50 in 5 years, that's all we can potentially get reimbursed for. Anything after 5 years, day one, after that, is not eligible for reimbursement. That way you have a specific time frame. You know you're not gonna be on the hook for 10, 15, 20 years of a potential 380 or 381. The development period is only for 5 years, and then depending on how much we get designed and built and sold will determine the reimbursement. Finally, just the reimbursement rate. Again, I think it's important for the city and the county to have some stipulations. You just don't want a blank check and say, all right, this guy comes in and builds and he sells them for over $250,000 or $350,000, depending on the square footage. So we do it based on price per square foot. $210 a square foot is the base. If we did that, then 100% of that 80% would go to pay down the infrastructure cost. And there's a graduated scale. 220, you only get 90% of that 80%. All down, if you get over $250 a square foot, 251, zero. So if we go in there and we're having a hard time selling and we have to sell because the demand is what it is and we can't sell houses, that's all on us, or on us as Lynn Development, and we have to, the only house we can sell is a $500,000 house. Okay, we get 0%. No harm, no foul, no taxes are going to pay for any of the infrastructure. Lynn Development gets 0%, zero out of that. So I think that's a very good way to look at it, to where you as a city and the county are not, there's some very strict stipulations on what is paid back and what percent of that is. With that, I'd like to answer, there's some appendix and there's some deeper stuff as far as if we want to get in the weeds on specific numbers and those things. But, and that was what I just discussed right there as far as the 210 to 250 a square foot. With that, I'd love to answer any questions, or if there's anything that you want us to research and get back to you on. Again, I'll say this, at the end of the day, we want to be part of the solution. This is not Stuart Lynn trying to come in here and shove this down anybody's throat. I've already purchased the land, I've closed on it. I'm going to develop the land one way or the other. I think this is a good win-win for everyone. But at the end of the day, that's not what the city or the county wants. I just need to know so that we can go more in a more traditional direction. So one thing, I know y'all are very familiar with the TERS because y'all have already approved one, so I don't need to go into this, but this is just a quick little slide that we use anytime we're doing 380 or 381 or TERS, and it just says, you know, the base value is in the gray zone, the very low zone there, and if nothing happens, then the taxes are going to stay the same. So it is what it is. But with the increase, 20% would stay in the green, which is to the city and the county, whatever that amount is, and 80%, the blue, would be go towards help pay back the infrastructure. And then once it's all paid at the end of the term, or when it's paid back, then 100% of that goes back to the respective entities, the city and the county, and in that. So with that, I'd love to answer any questions or entertain any comment.
I have some. Can you go back to the reimbursement rate table?
Yes, ma'am. This one here?
Okay, so by what you were saying, if you achieve the 210 per square foot, you'd get reimbursed at 100% of the 80.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that would make the house cost $247,000 and some change, correct?
Depending on the square footage, but yeah, on
We're
that
at 210
square
price
feet
per square foot would equal 247 and some change.
for,
Correct? Is that correct?
yeah, it depends what square footage it'd be. On a 1,200 square foot house, it would be 1,200 times 210. If the 1,300 square foot, 13 times 210. But that's about.
Okay, so we'll go off of the approximation from the two
Yes.
slides previous where you did a 1,170.
70. That's what that number came from. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
so
Yeah.
let's go based on that number
Okay.
for each of them. Now, what's the intention of increasing to 210, 230? Is that,
There's not intention. It's just if for some reason, say the 1,200 square foot house is not selling well because people want a bigger house and they want a 1,400 square foot house, and I have to sell it for, you know, more money, then it's, instead of having a 210 or nothing, it's some graduated.
so say we sell it for 230 because of the market.
Right.
That then is increasing that house to 270,000. That's not obtainable housing.
That's right, and that's why, okay, and so if whatever that number is, and these percents, we just
So
had to start with something.
My concern is this 380, 381 agreement is contingent upon completion of the development, but then also the market at the time of completion. Correct?
What do you mean by that?
So if you can't sell a house at $210 per square foot at the 1178,
Right.
which is affordable. We look at that price of 247,000 and some change. We look at that and we say, this seems affordable. But if you can't achieve that sell and close that sell, then we're gonna be ticking that sell price up per square foot. Say we get to 230. Is $270,000 home, is that affordable? And then Ms. Underwood stated everything monetary additions onto that mortgage.
Right, so yeah, that number, if it makes sense for that to be 60% or 50% or 0%, that's fine. We just need to come up to what y'all are comfortable that makes sense. And if it doesn't, if you think affordable housing is only gonna be, the thing is, affordable housing is not just a price point, it's also, if you have a bigger family and they need more than a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, they probably don't need a 1,200, they may need a 1,400. So you take that same square footage price, it obviously increases the price, But it's also, if you have a bigger family, then, you know, maybe both parents are working, and so maybe there's different price points based on size of the house. And that's why I think it makes more sense to do a square footage price, because that's uniform across everything. If you just pick a straight price, say 250, well, then I could just do what this other guy's doing and build an 800 square foot house and sell it for 250. I'd make way more money, but that 800 square foot is not the house that a typical family is gonna build, or needs to live in. So, and all these numbers, I mean, whatever, but we can sit down and, you know, what makes sense makes sense. If it's only 210, and you say, you know what, I only want to pay back 100% of the 80 if it's 210, if it's 211, we don't want to pay anything back, then we just need to run the numbers and just see how that makes sense. And have a good, big enough escalator based on the CPI cost. If cost does go up, then obviously that's all gonna, if costs go up, then, you know, cost of living goes up, everything else goes up, income's supposed to rise. So whatever, none of this is set in stone. It's just, again, a starting point to have these conversations.
This reimbursement rate, is it basically on that 40,000 roughly per lot? Is that how that's tied to this?
It's based on the actual cost of what of the infrastructure is. So you don't, obviously we have it at 6.5 million. Honestly, I think I can get it cheaper because I think I can get my guys to come all the way from Bay City. But this is what the current rate, as far as the local contractors, we've bid it out to have a rough idea. But it's whatever it is. So if it's 6.5 and it comes in at 6 million, well then you'd only obviously reimburse. I have to have 3 bids, and it has to be the lowest bid unless y'all approve different, and it's only based on that number.
And if you don't do 100% build out in 5 years, whatever percentage is built out, that will adjust the term.
That caps it, that's right. So just for easy number, it's 6.5, and I only got 50% sold, 50% built, then you're only talking about half of 3.25 or whatever the number is.
Mr. Lynn, what, on the year of the 380, proposed 380, 381 agreements, we're pushed out to 22 years. What is the advantage, disadvantage of pushing it out so many years versus, you know, a 10-year or 15-year or something less, less in terms?
So right on the page, right, let's see, on where the reimbursement rate is, the page before that is just a quick calculation. If you look at year number 10, the value is, just say we capped it at year 10. There would be 1 million from the 380, which is the city, and 858. So 1.8 would all that would be reimbursed on year 10. It's the only reason we had 22, because if you take the 6.5 million for the infrastructure down at year 22, if you add 3.4 and 2.8, that's right about 6.5. So it would take 22 years to pay that back. Provided we did 100% in 5 years, and provided that we did them all at 210 or less. And that'd be the 80%, makes that those together, 80%.
I guess, have we looked at other options other than the 380, 381 agreements to have some kind of public-private participation, still make the project viable, but not a 22-year abatement? Are there other opportunities out there?
Not that we personally done it. We've done the 380, 381, done the TERS. Yeah, and maybe this is 80%, because that way 20% does go to the entities. If you did 100%, then obviously that would lower it, but then there's no, that 20% I think is good for the city and the county to just cover the basic cost as we're getting paid back. But we're open to, again, this is what I'm familiar with doing, this is what we've done in the past, and this is what we've talked about with Jeff and then the county and the city. So we're open to anything.
Jeff, Jeff Hutt.
Yeah, over the last year, as we looked at the community's goal for attainable housing, we've tried to look at the toolbox of different programs that are there that could actually help leverage private sector investment with public sector improvement, and trying to address the actual target markets of what we're looking at for being able to house our workforce. So there's a laundry list of programs from public facility corporations, housing finance corporations, the 380, 381, the TERSs, and then a lot of the programs aren't even on the hit list for us because they're part of the Texas Department of Community Housing Affairs. With Aransas County and Rockport being non-entitlement cities and counties, it's not the same as some of the bigger cities where they're a direct entitlement city or county. They get direct allocations from HUD through TDHCA as it comes down from the federal to the state. So those tools aren't on the books. I agree wholeheartedly with the non-financial incentives per se in terms of density and setbacks and all of those things. But it's kind of a laundry list. So what we've tried to do is facilitate evaluating all of these various programs and trying to come up with the right mix in terms of programs that could help to bring this forward. And I think with what Lynn Development is proposing, and specifically to the price points, with the 380, 381, yes, it's very similar to a TERS, but it's not a TERS. It absolutely is not a tax abatement. And we need to stop using those terms interchangeably because they're different. But with this, should you decide that you want to explore it a step further and actually get into the creation of a potential development agreement, then it would be up to you as the elected leadership to negotiate what that development agreement is. And that's where you have the power to protect what the city's interest, what the county's interest, what the community's interest is in terms of what you would expect from the development and what the price points would be and what the payback provisions would be in the development of that. Again, should you choose to go forward.
Jeff? Are there any tax credits available for a development like this through HUD?
There are, and I think that's one of the things that came up with when the Pro Point project was converted over to Reef Development, and they came and asked you for permission to make the project accessible to the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. There are housing tax credits. They have bond programs at 4% and 9%. There are programs that they can take advantage of. For a project like we're talking here, when it's home ownership based, that becomes much harder to put together. And so,
Jeff, how does a long-term projected increase in property values, how does that affect the tax base and then the payout if we use the 381?
So I think as you look and as we get into the weeds with regard to the categorization schedule that Lynn has put together, that Mr. Lynn has put together, I think he's put a fairly conservative estimate in terms of what the growth in the tax rate will be and what the interest rates and all of those factors. I think with what his numbers are, it could potentially pay off faster. But I think all of that will go into as we start to actually look at the formation of the development agreement, figuring out where your comfort level is in terms of the flip side of it is, as Stuart alluded to, you constrict his development time frame to a 5-year term, conceptually, just for argumentative purposes. That means he has to come in and build it, put all the infrastructure up front. Remember, what we're talking about here is a project where he's looking for a $5-6 million reimbursement on infrastructure. His total project cost is going to be $30 million, give or take, whatever, because it doesn't include all of the construction costs for the units and what have you. So as we look at that public infrastructure, putting some, we call them clawback provisions, but putting some conditions within that development agreement to hold his feet to the fire, to enhance the return on investment that you're getting in terms of, the public benefit for this type of project, as we've talked with the school district about and what their priority that they've shared with me is, they need housing for teachers. And they need housing that teachers can afford so we stop losing them, not just from living here, but from working here. And so that's where we have some flexibility as we actually get into putting together what that development agreement would include and what you feel comfortable with. And then it's up to you, Mr. Lynn, to decide whether or not, if this is a straight up private market deal, there's no reason for incentives. There's no reason to talk about a public-private partnership. But if the developer is attempting to address a need that's been expressed in the community, then that's where it's your decision as to whether or not that justifies an equitable partnership between the parties.
I think I could be more inclined to support it if I know what we could get, something that doesn't just support this development, you know, the infrastructure, the water, sewer, gas, you know, whatever our needs are for this development, if we could expand it. I'm not asking you to go all the way to South County line, but, you know, to get infrastructure in that area that would service not just this one.
And there is about 700,000 of that 6.5, maybe a little bit more, but is to run a line all the way from this property to the lift station, upsize that lift station in Forest Main, and there's a couple of blocks that are empty that those could all be served. So it's not doing a quarter of the town, but there is, again, over 10% of the cost is offsite, bringing it to here. So obviously we need it, but then also it help, you know, for instance, we're gonna run a big line from Market Street all the way down to Irish. We have Crowley who wants to develop that, and so that'll all need infrastructure, so that's all gonna be in place as well. Not to mention the sewers going from the southernmost piece property all the way to the lift station, about 4 blocks, and so there's literally 4 blocks and upgrading that lift station there, which I think the lift station is compatible with it now, but it's gonna be increased, so that would take any growth in that area is all it comes for.
Mm-hmm.
We did all that through y'all's engineer in Corpus, ran all those numbers ahead of time.
City staff.
And city staff.
And see, that was my concern, because I haven't heard anything about outside of the area. I'm gonna even give a second thought to having to give any kind of tax, you know, forgiveness or anything like that. I want it to benefit more than just the little area or the developer. I want it to, as the area in South Rockport has, you know, known issues and, you know, any help they can get outside that with their, you know, flooding and with their water intake over there, that is gonna be something that I think even the commissioners and the city council all would be more inclined to help, you know, be in favor of anything on that side of it. I'm sorry I was not here at the other meeting, so I'm sorry if this already asked, like, so why, with Stephanie's question, I think what she was trying to hear to, why are we not doing maybe smaller lots to lower that square footage amount down, so then we're not just going out there and going, okay, well, if someone comes in and is willing to pay $300,000, then the families that are here that are workers, what we're building this for, are not giving the opportunity to have these housing. What is the motive of your size of lots? Why did you not look at smaller lots and maybe just making it a set way, so then the people that are here are going to be able to afford it, or know they're going to be able to afford it in the long run?
Yeah, and to Stephanie, we're talking about worst case scenario. The lots, we are having the lots, we'd have to actually get it rezoned to R1 or R2 that makes it 50 by 100 lots. So those are the smallest lots you can do. So it'd be really hard to do a 17. Again, I try to be over conservative and I definitely don't want to over promise and deliver. I've seen that too many times. But you'd have a hard time building a 1,700, 2,000 square foot house on a 50 by 100 lot. So we're somewhat capped. I guess I could do a 2-story or something, but that's.
But why don't we keep it to a smaller house? Like the 1147 is what you were saying for the 247,000. Why? I know we can change the agreement, but when we're speaking and we're going to be putting this out there to the citizens and everything, we want to make sure that, okay, well, we're not going to even try to go to a higher level or try to make sure that it's not going to be attainable. Because I think that's the last 380 agreement that we had, was that it was supposed to be one thing and it turned into another, and we do not want that happening again. So we want to make very clear that we have to make our choices very clear about what we want out of this, if it's even going to be, you know, come to fruition into the citizens.
Yeah, and part of the issue is trying to figure out enough of the potential scenarios before they happen. But we want to only build 1,178 square foot house because it's easier to turn, it's easier to sell a $250,000 house than a $350,000. But again, if we get into it and for some reason those houses, you know, whatever, they want a 1,300 square foot house, we're trying to have some kind of provision that we can still get, because our costs are still the same, a little bit more for an extra 100 square feet. But so it's a finding a balance. But I mean, I hear you, we want to build a 1,200 square foot house, and I hope that's all we have to build.
Just keep in mind that's going to be something that's going to be just, I know my own thought is to make sure that you keep it actually attainable and not just keep adding more so you can get the dollar up or someone wants more. There's other houses they can buy for 2,000 square feet. Right. If we're going to have this area and have it for their size and for the people that need to afford, that want to afford that amount, we need to make sure that we keep it for them. Like, that's just where my concern goes.
Yes, no, very good. So, and part of it, the 210 is, so I don't make any more money building a 1,300 square house than a 1,200 because it's still, the price per square foot is still set. If anything, I could actually lose something, but still, I'm not making any more money, but I do agree that price is going up and that defeats the purpose. So at some point, it doesn't make sense to sell a $400,000 house, even if it's 5,000 square feet, you do it for $90 a square foot. That's as cheap as house you can get, but if you can't afford a $450,000 house, who cares how cheap per square foot it is?
One of the things too, and we talked about this in the first workshop a little bit, part of what I give Stuart credit for is he came in and read what our housing assessment indicated. He looked at what the survey responses were from the survey that we did with employers and with folks that were looking for housing. The people that responded to that were desirous that they would choose to live in Rockport if they could find an attainable priced home with the types of amenities that are comparable to other areas. But it's incredibly important to realize this project is not gonna fix attainable housing for Aransas County. This is one shot at trying to get a project below the price band to get between that 250 to 350 price band to see if we can fill that need. There's gonna be other price band approaches that we have to look at. My biggest concern when you have a community where 75% of the workforce is service sector, this isn't attainable housing for the service sector. We're gonna have to continue looking at tools and strategies, and for all the people that say there's easier ways to do it, I'm open to any ideas, suggestions, or strategies as to how we make it happen. This is just one approach for a specific opportunity to get below what 95% of the existing housing that's in planned development is currently within Aransas County.
How does the cost per home here compare to the homes you did in subdivisions in Palacios and Bay City?
The ones in Palacios are at $225 on average, and really the difference between the 225 and the 250 is literally the land cost.
Okay, and then what percentage is the build out in Palacios and in Bay City?
Palacios is right 40%, and Bay City, 100% of those lots are sold. I'm not building those houses in Bay City. I sold those to Lennar and Century, two builders.
In Palacios, what's the median income of the people that are buying houses so far?
Anybody know what that is? Less than Rockport, I bet, we want to do that.
Yeah, and you have to understand too, the cost of your development is much, much less because the land cost is less. I mean, there's a lot of things lower.
And that's really the difference, the 225.
I wonder what the median income is, because Rockport, really, our median income for the people that need this is not what you would have in Portland or places like that. So I'm wondering how that compares to what you're seeing.
Median income in Palacios is much lower than Rockport.
What's that?
Median income in Palacios is much lower than Rockport. I'd have to pull up exactly.
It is much lower in Palacios than, okay.
Palacios is much lower than Rockport, yes.
What is your,
What
do you believe Rockport is? The median income?
I haven't been directly involved. I'd have to look it up for today.
You know those numbers, Jeff?
I do, but what I'm thinking is maybe we transition to the next topic just in lieu of your time so we can keep this moving and get you out of here at a reasonable hour. But we actually have the area median income for Galveston County within the Housing Finance Corporation presentation. And I think if we let them, they can run through that for you just to give you the comparables of what Aransas County numbers are and what that looks like.
Good. Thank you. Yes.
And let me just say thank you all. I know that
Jeff,
meetings are
before
done.
we go on, can we take a quick break?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If y'all are good, okay.
Right. I'm sorry, that's probably, it's gonna be
All right, we're gonna go back in open session, or back to the meeting.
Thank you, Judge Mayor. Honorable elected leaders of our community. I do have to say thank you. I know you all have meetings, unbelievable meetings, so thank you for taking the time to be here today. I greatly, greatly appreciate it, and I'm excited that at least we're moving the ball down the field, so thank you for your leadership on that, and we'll see where we go. What I'd like to do now is introduce two people that I've been working with for some time. Rachel Jensen with the Chapman Legal Firm, and Megan Ramos from Hilltop Securities. Hilltop Securities is a group that I have a pretty good awareness of from my time in the Houston-Galveston region. Hilltop is a significant player in the government financing sector, municipal bonds, working with communities. As we started looking for alternative programs, I went to TDHCA to look at their, when I wanted to look at the housing finance corporations, I went through information they had. And when I looked at the list of housing finance corporations across the state of Texas, over 80% of those housing finance corporations that are in existence have Hilltop Securities listed as their secondary point of contact. They have extensive experience in housing finance corporations. And what I've asked Rachel and Megan to do today is just give you that 1,000-foot view. What is a housing finance corporation? How does it work? How could it benefit us as a community talking about attainable housing? So thank you all for coming down today. And
hello, good evening all. Thank you all for having us today. So I'm Megan Ramos. I'm with Hilltop Securities. My team and I represents about 35 to 40 active HFCs across the state of Texas, one of them actually out in Florida. Majority of the work is spread out across the state of Texas. And I'll turn it over to my partner here.
Hi, and I'm Rachel Jensen. Appreciate the introduction from Jeff, and we work with Hilltop across the state of Texas with a number of primarily housing finance corporations, some public facility corporations, but certainly pleased to be here and present this information. There's a lot of details in the slides, but we'll try to keep it high level and brief, and then happy to take your questions. But as Jeff said, he considers this one tool that might be beneficial for the community here, and Chapman and Hilltop do this work across the state, so we're happy to just be here and share a little bit about how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. We passed out a PowerPoint presentation kind of slide. We certainly don't want to go into all the nitty-gritty detail, but just kind of a high level. As we've been talking about the private-public partnerships, what that entails in the single-family world, we'll kind of go over that in the housing finance corporation world. With these partnerships, obviously there needs to be incentive for both parties for it to make sense. We'll kind of touch base on the first slide. What does it mean for the developer? Why would the developer want to be interested in this, proceeding this route? Under state statute, Housing Finance Corporation and all the property it owns, it's exempt from licensing fees, recording fees, ad valorem taxes, sales tax exemptions on material if they're in the role as a general contractor. So there's various savings that can be captured with the development in order to reach the affordable components of the rents. Having the developer partner with a housing finance corporation also can kind of bridge the gap of the communication with the community, and it kind of help that partnership establish what does the community want, how can the developer kind of achieve that, and have that kind of inside voice in that partnership kind of established. I know we talked a little bit about, tax credits, so there's a question there. So we have the 9% and the 4% tax credits that are issued through the state agency, Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, also known as TDHCA. With the 4% tax credits, there's also private activity bonds that are issued with the assistance of the Housing Finance Corporation. And then there's also the kind of conventional financing way, where there's no tax credits involved, no tax exempt bonds. The HFC is in the partnership to allow for the previous ad valorem, tax savings, sales tax savings, those types of savings. So there's a variety of ways of the participation of the Housing Finance Corporation. And then, most importantly, why would y'all be interested in? And it's, one of the ways, kind of like I just mentioned, there's that partnership with the developer. You as a community has more say into what you all want to see in this multifamily community or development. Whether it's, more affordability, social services being offered for the residents. If there's issues with the property and, residents are complaining, they'll probably reach out to you, and you can have more say and control of the, quality of life of those residents. Also, there's a financial incentive. Though it is 100% property tax exemption on the property, there's various fees that the housing finance would claw back, per se. So the fees can vary in upfront fees, ongoing annual fees, fees at the time of a sale of the property or refinance of property. So that's kind of Hilltop's role in negotiating, what would be appropriate for the community, and still making the multifamily development still feasible.
So I can talk a little bit about, and this may be a few steps early, but just in terms of setting this up, if that's something that you would choose to do. So as Megan mentioned, the Housing Finance Corporation is set up under state statute. There's Chapter 394 of the Texas Local Government Code that provides for this as, a public interest in creating housing for families of low and moderate income. So if this is something that you chose to move forward and do, as for example, the Aransas County Housing Finance Corporation, the county commissioners would take action on a resolution to approve it, and then there would be articles of incorporation filed with the Secretary of State, and that's something that, Chapman can help prepare the paperwork and do. And then there would be an initial board of directors appointed. It's optional to have the elected body of the local government that is forming the HFC be also functioning as the board of directors, or sometimes there's a separate board of directors that's chosen. It just, depends on local preferences. And then that board of directors would meet as needed to handle any ongoing business. So just setting up the Housing Finance Corporation in of itself doesn't commit you to a particular project or to any kind of, developments, but then under the powers and authority of that Housing Finance Corporation, you could entertain proposals from developers and move forward with the process, like Megan said, of, negotiating specific projects and what the kind of public benefit return would be. So there's a lot more detail in the next couple of slides, and I'm happy to answer questions, but I'll just kind of keep moving on to really, some of what Megan touched on, what the Housing Finance Corporation can do. So it can make contracts, so that would include, entering into the various agreements that would be part of a multifamily housing development, where it would be in the partnership and ownership structure of, usually, there's a limited liability company or a limited partnership that is set up to own the development. So the Housing Finance Corporation would have an ownership in that, and it owns the land that the project would be constructed on, or if the project is already in existence, if it's like a rehabilitation project, then it would own the land underlying that development. It's authorized to issue notes and bonds. So some housing finance corporations in the state are issuers of bonds, and then they can participate in that 4% low-income housing tax credit program through TDHCA that Megan mentioned. Other HFCs don't issue bonds, and they might just do conventionally financed programs where the developer partners with a lender and brings in just conventional financing. And the tax abatement that the HFC brings into the project is part of the overall puzzle and making it, pencil so that the development can actually move forward. So one of the other statutory requirements is that, yes, sir.
Would you mind referencing the page number? I see you're flipping through.
Oh, sure, certainly. So that, what I was just describing is on slide 6, in terms of the powers that the Housing Finance Corporation has. And then if we,
can just chime in really quick. Since we're discussing, issuing bonds, these are not general obligation bonds. These are revenue bonds, so it's not an obligation of the county, city, any other taxing entity. So they're backed by the revenues of the project and the, responsible party. We documented, and Chapman's role is documented where the responsible party is the borrower, AKA developer. So there's no really any obligation of the county, city, any housing finance corporation for the repayment of principal and interest of those bonds.
Okay, so the bond issued is not backed by the city or the county as bond taxes will.
Correct, right. The Housing Finance Corporation essentially is just a conduit issuer to receive that kind of tax exemption status.
And you said typical would be a revenue bond, is that right?
Right, revenue bonds, right, multifamily housing revenue bonds.
Revenue based on like a multifamily, how is that, the revenue bond, how is it backed by the revenue of that multifamily, I guess?
So it's essentially the income of the rental income that is being achieved at the apartment complex.
Okay, so that's what you should back that.
Right, correct.
And is it issued, the Housing Finance Corporation, is it per project, or is there or could it be countywide? The Housing Finance Corporation be countywide and projects are
Yeah, so the Housing Finance Corporation would essentially be countywide. The issuance of the bonds would be project specific. Correct, yes, sir.
And we could come back and do another several hours of presentation on the bond program, and it's all through there's the bond review board through the state, and there's different allocations that are made each year. So happy to do that another time as well.
I was just gonna say, it's not like the sales tax from the new bells or anything like that.
No, it's specific, it's through there's a private activity bond program, and then there's allocations that are set up through the state, so there's a whole application process the developer does to apply for the specific project, and then it's all secured by that specific project. And same for if we're talking about conventional financing where there's no bonds at issue, if there's a loan made to finance the project, again, it's only recourse to the project. There would never be a situation unless really we didn't do our jobs correctly, where the Housing Finance Corporation would be responsible for repayment. It would all be, the loan is secured by the project and is expected to be repaid by revenues from the project.
As long as you're answering questions, I have one that goes back to page 1, so sorry. But the very first thing you talk about, the corporation and all the property it owns are exempt from license fees, recording fees, and all other taxes imposed by the state. And it includes the sales and ad valorem property taxes as an exemption too. Where is our benefit if this property is going to be developed and we're not going to get the sales and ad valorem, or am I misreading this?
No, so it's correct that the property would be exempt from those taxes. So the property itself would be exempt from the ad valorem taxes, and then sales tax would be any materials that are used in the construction of the project or rehabilitation of the project could qualify for sales tax. What Megan and Hilltop do in their role is they run a whole public benefit analysis where then I'll let you describe it.
No problem. So the benefit that the Housing Finance Corporation would receive back would be the various fees that we claw back within the transaction. If you're an issuer of the private activity bonds, you would get an issuance fees as well just for being in that role, and that is present whether you're in the partnership to allow for the abatements or if you're just the bond issuer. There's those fees, there's other fees such as annual lease payments, which we typically estimate how much the exempt taxes will be over, long-term period, 15-year period, et cetera. Calculate, a percentage of fee based off that, so that would go back to you all.
That would go back to the government entities.
The Housing Finance Corporation, and then as a Housing Finance Corporation, if that is, y'all choose to establish, then you would assume, have policy guidelines as to how you would want to reinvest that back into the community, whether that's, various single-family initiatives. We've had clients, donate to Habitat for Humanity, scholarships. We've had donations directly to school ISDs because it is 100% tax exempt. That does include school districts and school taxes. So we've had housing finances pay directly what we call a payment in lieu of taxes directly to the school district, or if it's, to the city. So it's kind of varies. Other benefits are, social services that could be offered at the communities, such as, after-school programs for children, food pantries, financial literacy classes. The goal is, multifamily is the stepping stone to single-family, home ownership. So we do see a lot of housing finance corporations that do try to have social services to kind of encourage people. Not only are they hopefully receiving rental savings versus if this was, just a standard market rate property, they try to also kind of reinvest back into the residents as well.
Thank you.
And these are great questions, so please feel free to jump in at any time. So I'm going to go on to slide 7, where we talk about, what the requirements are to create this, attainable housing. In order for the Housing Finance Corporation to own and participate in this type of project, under statute, at least 90% of the units have to be reserved for occupancy for persons of low and moderate income. So moderate income is a level that would be set by the Housing Finance Corporation's policy. We see clients handle it different ways, typically something between 120% to 140% of AMI, but then there's often deeper targeting. If the HFC is a bond issuer, it's a firm requirement, but in most cases as a policy requirement, 50% of the units in a multifamily development would also need to be reserved for families that earn less than 80% of the area median income. And we have a chart on page 8 that kind of outlines the different income bands. Many HFCs choose to target even deeper and try to get, at least 10 to 20% of the units in the development at 60% area median income, but it can, vary depending on policy and the type of project that the HFC might choose to entertain.
Right. I'd say generally, your tax credit deals that are issued by TDHCA, those deals primarily target those making 60% of area median income and lower. The kind of conventionally financed, what we call workforce, is your, your central workers making between 60 to 80% of area median income. So depending on how it's financially structured will kind of really drive to also the affordability requirements as well. I'll also mention, these transactions are, documented and structured where they are income limits driven, and due to the income limits, there's also rent limits based off those income limits. I will say just Hilltop in general on those conventionally financed transactions where, 50% of the units are deemed to be, restricted or affordable. We also incorporate additional restrictions on rental rates. So for example, if the naturally occurring market rate rent here in Rockport is, for example, falling underneath like 80% of area median income, we require additional rental savings to ensure there's actually rental savings occurring. So we write into the regulatory agreements, which is the enforceable document for these requirements of there has to be a 10% discount to market rate rent. So ensuring that there is some rental savings that the tenants will be experiencing.
So on slides 9 and 10, if Chapman and Hilltop in our role as advisors to an HFC, it just describes some of the things that we would be responsible for doing. As you can kind of get a sense from the 40 slides we have here, these are pretty complicated transactions. So we typically guide the transaction. I think Tim at Hilltop always likes to say you can think of us as like the additional staff of the Housing Finance Corporation. I mean, some of the larger ones in Texas have one or more dedicated staff members, but many are smaller and maybe only do a project every couple of years or as the community needs dictate. So whatever the range of activity is, the typical things that we would do aside from guiding the initial setup of the HFC would be negotiating any of the documents. There's typically a memorandum of understanding that's prepared at the very outset of a transaction that just outlines the expected terms between the developer and the HFC. And then as, additional parties and partners come into the transaction with the lender, and there's typically an equity investor, there's additional documents that we, negotiate and draft and prepare, any resolutions or supporting materials that the governing body would need, we handle that. And, as we kind of outlined, Chapman, my team is situated within our public finance team at Chapman, but, we have partners who are very experienced in the issuance of bonds and tax matters, and partnership governance. So just bringing kind of all that experience together to help, govern these transactions. And I'll let Megan talk a little about the role of the financial advisor.
Yeah, absolutely. So our role is primarily we're, kind of the interface between the Housing Finance Corporation and the developer. So we're communicating between the two parties. Our interest is with the Housing Finance Corporation. We do have a fiduciary duty to the HFC. However, we, work with the developer just as much and, coordinate with them. So we review any type of proposals that they are presenting to the Housing Finance Corporation. Gather due diligence information, financials, what they're looking to propose, rental, the unit mix, affordability levels, fees, things of that nature. We estimate, if it's an existing property or new construction, we look at the tax impact of the development if there is a tax exemption that is being requested. And then kind of determine what would be appropriate fees and affordability requirements depending on what type of structure it is, and report that back to the HFC and kind of give you the pros and cons of proceeding with the transaction versus not. We also so we kind of call that our public benefit analysis. We also assist with the drafting of documents with legal counsel, with everything from the memorandum of understanding, look at the bond docs, loan docs, partnership documents, and make sure, between the financial advisor and, Chapman and legal counsel that the HFC is, protected in every which way and all business agreements are documented correctly.
So the next several slides, this is where I'm not going to go very deep into the weeds, but the overall concept for the partnership structure here is that it would, through the participation of the Housing Finance Corporation in this partnership structure, would qualify the project for that tax exemption. And then through that, we'll get into, again, some of the return and fees that the HFC might receive. So once the HFC is formed, again, if you have, let's say, a developer that approaches the HFC and wants to do a project, we would do the memorandum of understanding that would outline the terms and conditions, and then proceed to kind of set up this partnership structure. So there would be a separate kind of borrower entity that owns the project. And if you look at slide 12, it kind of shows then where the HFC would fit in with that project. As part of the requirements for meeting the requirements for the ad valorem tax exemption, the HFC typically serves in the project as, or through a separate affiliate that it would set up, serves in the project as the general partner. It doesn't handle like day-to-day decision-making, except if the HFC has certain policies that it wants control over. Like, for example, many of the housing finance corporations like to take a more active role in the selection of the property manager. That would be kind of handling, resident issues and day-to-day life at the property. But for the most part, the developer partner is the partner that is managing the day-to-day, and also, very importantly, providing any guarantees that the lender or equity partners might require. So again, through the structure, there's not out-of-pocket costs intended to be borne by the public partner, which is the HFC. Everything should be, structured so that it's with the developer partner. Along with, again, qualifying for the tax abatement, the HFC owns the land for the development. So again, if it's a new development, there would just be, the land, or a rehab project, it would take title to the land, and then the developer would own and, make improvements on the apartment complex that's there. That's all, there's a structure in place that's been kind of tested through the courts to meet the requirements of the ad valorem tax exemption, to show that the HFC, even though it's in this private partnership with the developer partner and other financing partners, has equitable title to the project, which is the key for the tax exemption. So there's a ground lease structure in place where the HFC at the end of the ground lease would have technically a reversionary right to own the whole project. Typically these projects, just due to the life cycle of needing to be, just you think about like a home after 15, 20 years needs some updates and upgrades. There's, usually kind of a refinancing and recapitalization process that occurs. But, some HFCs are interested in more owning the projects more directly. So that could be, something, just as we're, thinking about the different policies and practices that you might want for your HFC, what are the important goals? Is it kind of ultimate long-term ownership? Is it, short-term, just getting, meeting the immediate needs of attainable housing in the community? Do we want to focus only on new construction? Do we want a mix of new construction and rehabilitating existing housing stock? There's a lot of different ways through this structure and through this tool that it can be used to, adapt and meet the needs of the community. So again, happy to answer any more detailed questions on these slides. I think we're probably pushing the limits of our time here, and I want to make sure Megan can talk any more about, the typical fees, which is on page 19, I think, to the earlier question about kind of, the benefits of participating in this structure. This outlines it a little bit more.
Right, so, on the left side of that page, typically within these transactions, there's a developer fee that's being received, so the Housing Finance Corporation.
Which page would you identify, please?
19.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. A developer fee that is present in these transactions, so the Housing Finance Corporation would typically be entitled to a split of that. We do build in a partnership management fee of $10,000, usually increasing by 3% annually, and that's just to account for any administrative, costs, accounting costs, whatever the Housing Finance Corporation would incur because of the participation in this partnership. They would also receive a percentage of cash flow, and usually we like to put that as a fixed payment where there's, we have a stake in the ground and it's not cash flow dependent per se versus, or, unpredictable depending on how the property cash flows. We also build in a sell refinance proceeds splits. Typically, we aim to achieve 1.5% of gross sales proceeds at the time of sale. As Rachel was mentioning before, there's these items that are needed for the abatements. One of those items is there's a purchase option, right of first refusal on the property if the HFC would be interested in actually becoming owner of the property. I will say in my team's history, probably nobody has actually exercised that, but that is there and it is needed for the abatements. And then I think as Rachel previously mentioned, there is increased oversight and kind of say into this property where, if things aren't going the way you want it to, you have a pretty good say in stepping in as a partner and kind of getting things fixed. So I'll stop there. Don't think, Rachel, you had any other items. Just we'll pause for any questions.
Yep.
Would it be okay for me to make a couple of summary comments? One, why county creation? The city could create a housing finance corporation, the county could create a housing finance corporation. In discussions with the city and the county leadership and the school district, we, at this point, are opting that it would make more sense to do it from a county level perspective, so that we have the entire county encompassed within this, just because of what the geography of Rockport and Rangel County is. Two, there would be, aside from the fact that this doesn't create a liability on the city or the county, there would be no cost to the city and the county for the creation of this. Hilltop, Chapman, that would be fees that would be paid by developers to fund the operations of the Housing Finance Corporation. And so there would be no cost that would come to you to create this type of a tool. With regard to transparency, we have been extremely purposeful. We've been having conversations with the city leadership, the county leadership, and the school district, because we want to make sure, for purposes of just evaluating the tool, that everybody's on the same page. And so we had invited the school district, but with it being spring break, it was a little awkward for today's meeting. But the superintendent has asked me to participate in an upcoming budget meeting of the school board. I've talked with their finance folks so that they understand what we're talking about. I know you all understand it 100% because all this information is so simple and it's a lot of information, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands. For us to move forward, I thought it was incredibly important that we have our taxing entities all at the table talking about this and evaluating this with regard to the impacts and the potential benefits of what this tool could create.
Did you ever find out, so these properties, it's off the tax rolls, but they're gonna be appraised. They're gonna have a value, so how does it affect recapture?
The school district's perspective on it, just to simplify it, is the community benefit to them would be if we could get some families moving into these properties and get more students in the seats to directly impact the recapture of the Robin Hood payment that they make. In talking with their finance folks, we've had kind of a high-level conversation with regard, and I think, frankly, once the school district realized that there really wasn't any role for them in terms of approval or what have you, they're really weighing it more on housing, students.
Housing to get families,
Right.
kids, butts and seats, or, excuse me, kids and seats.
The last thing I would say is that we do have a potential project in the wings that it took me a little while to understand, but it is a housing for rent project that could be coming forward if we move forward with the Housing Finance Corporation that could directly utilize this. But the concept, and again, we just wanted to introduce the Housing Finance Corporation concept today, but in working with different developers and having these conversations across the board, there could be a real project where we could see a property or a project developed where it could have multifamily, duplex, and single-family homes all available for rent within the criteria established with regard to the rent that would be paid by these folks. So this, I think, is a real opportunity for us. My perspective, this is where we really hit the workforce of the service sector, is by being able to try and create some properties where they actually are affordable and they're not market rate rents like so much is what they.
Realistically, would that more likely be rental properties versus home ownership?
100%. Yep. And again, that goes back to, I wish there was a silver bullet where we could have one project solve it all. But the biggest part for me, what I'm looking at is kind of a roadmap, creating a baseline so that if you opt to do a 380, 381, then we have something that if a future developer comes in and says, well, maybe I'm willing to build lower priced housing, then we already have a process in place to evaluate and to look at going forward. Likewise with the Housing Finance Corporation, if there's another developer that wants to do a project that fits more with the needs of where our community is, as opposed to just maximizing profit, then we have a tool that's ready to go, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we go forward.
I realize this is very complicated, and thank you for sharing what you did with me a week ago so that I could at least start to familiarize myself with it. And I'm not even going to pretend I fully understand it. But I will tell you that I have just a mental problem with the fact that we aren't going to encourage property to be developed, and we're not going to collect sales tax or ad valorem tax on that property. I'm going to have a hard time explaining that to anyone who asks, what do we think we're doing? And maybe there's something in here, and I'll certainly go through here and look at it some more. But just at first blush, it's a hard pill.
One of the things that Megan touched on, and if I ever want to be able to go into the city manager's office again, where I'll be leaning towards, and as it relates to the developer agreements, and I think we have to push extremely hard on the payment in lieu of taxes, so that we can have revenues coming back to the city and the county as a part of the development agreements. that help pay for some of those basic services and the things that go back to the general fund, to the city and the county, so that you are getting some financial benefit out of these, and it's not just social service programs.
That's kind of what was piggybacking on Commissioner Rousseau's comment there. That's what I was gonna ask is, where is the benefit for the city or the county if we do lose all that opportunity for the ad valorem and impact fees and other options of gathering fees for us? And it's forever, right? And once it goes to the housing finance corporation, it's off the tax rolls for life.
Right, so long as the Housing Finance Corporation is involved in the partnership.
So they're in that development.
Contract or?
Right, yeah, so, I mean, the ground leases can be for a long period of time. I mean, a market term can be 99 years. Some housing finance corporations do a shorter time period between 45 to 75 years. But there are sale rights within the agreements as well. So I think sometimes depending on what the developer and investor team are looking for, they might come in anticipating to, look to sell in 10 to 15 years. If there was ever a sale where the Housing Finance Corporation was no longer a part of the project, then it would be placed on to the tax rolls unless there was some other qualifying reason for it not to.
And the ask isn't typically for help me provide infrastructure and roads and streets and sewer for this project. It's just, I'm off the tax rolls for life.
That creates the financial incentive.
That creates, there's the financial
to buy down
incentive.
the cost of the rentals. And that's, just for clarity, the biggest benefit to looking at something like this is providing workforce housing that we've talked about for 20 years as a community, but we've never figured out how to present it.
So that
We've never
doing
created.
it this way, I guess not artificially, but the intention of it is to drive the cost down for the developer to be able to use the market rate or the whatever it is, market rate, I guess.
Drive the cost of the rent down.
Yeah,
Right.
drive the cost of rent down.
So if you look in this, and it's pretty close, but Pearl Point today for a 2-bedroom is gonna average somewhere between $1,700 and $1,900 a month. With the Housing Finance Corporation of this structure, you can make those 2 bedrooms available for $1,200 or $1,300 a month. And if you want a 1-bedroom or a 3-bedroom, so that is the benefit that goes to the potential users, is that you buy down the cost of that monthly rent and actually present a product where our baristas or our waiters or,
Clerks of the county.
economic developers. And frankly, that's one of the bigger concerns that I have overall is, we're an economic development corporation. We're looking for ways to expand and diversify the tax base. We're looking for ways for creating quality jobs. One of my biggest concerns is if we don't figure out this workforce housing and start doing something about it, we potentially could end up either restricting the amount of new development that can come in because they can't find the workforce. We have a property right now that's been purchased that was supposed to be open that hasn't opened because they're not convinced they can find the workforce. Worse is we open up a new project and all of a sudden, for argument, Judge Garza opens up a new business and he starts attracting existing workers for $1 more an hour. And now we see just the trend that we've already seen. The number of days that restaurants are open, the number of hours that stores are open, continue to decline because we don't have enough workforce to go across.
Last question, I promise, for me. Is this any way associated with or related to HUD or Section 8 housing? Is this, no? Not about
Public housing, Section 8 housing is typically what you see with housing authorities. We don't have one here, there's one in Corpus Christi. Housing authorities play a different role. The closest that I could see, I went to East Lake Village one time in Atlanta, probably the best example of a mixed-use development, where they created a community where they had public housing, tax credit housing, and market rate housing, all interspersed within the development. It actually is bookended by 2 PGA Tour Championship golf courses. The redevelopment that has occurred has been exponential. And it's been not just the site of where the development occurred, but then around the area, development has been able to grow from there. So again, when we look at the palette of what we're trying to create in terms of that playbook, you know, getting more workers to be able to afford to live and work in Rockport, in Aransas County, gives us more opportunities for other business development activities that we're looking for as we speak.
Thank you, sir.
Regarding new development, would, like, the city still be eligible to, for developer impact fees and things like that, or would they be relinquished from that responsibility as well?
I think that's something we'd work with the Housing Finance Corporation and in the setup of the development agreements. I think there's gonna be kind of a fine line. One of the things that I've talked when we've had conversations about this, I think it's important to remember too, kind of the overall perspective. Our housing study showed over 3,000 units of planned residential development on the books today. It shows that the city has averaged 200 new housing permits annually for the last 5 to 7 years. When we're talking about a project for the Housing Finance Corporation, it would be a microcosm of the overall marketing scheme. Or I got in trouble for using, I think I used game last time. It's not a scheme. But in terms of the overall picture, this is a finite number of units that would come into the marketplace. And so the trick, I think, is gonna be, just like the development agreement, is working with your and the county's leadership in drafting and suggesting and working with the Housing Finance Corporation Board how we extract the benefit back to make the city and the county receive benefit, but maintain it so it's economically viable to produce the end product, if that's one of our goals, is to once and for all produce some affordable, middle-income, workforce, attainable housing.
So say there's new development, infrastructure to support the new development. City and county don't receive anything for the new development, but we're still at obligation to support the infrastructure that supports the development. So where's the benefit in that sense of infrastructure? Because we're still going to be responsible for supporting that infrastructure.
So the traditional model is the developer is responsible for the infrastructure inside the development. City and the county, depending on it, really the city, is responsible for the infrastructure to the location. That is going to be part of that return on investment and cost benefit analysis that Hilltop would perform in evaluating projects.
And do you have, can you provide us information with other similar maybe developments and agreements so that we can see that? Because it needs to be looked at in a short-term and long-term view on cost efficiency, I guess.
Yeah, I think we can provide some example documentation. I do one comment on the impact fees. Just from our experience with having developers request waivers of these impact fees, mainly that's kind of up to the city and their willingness to waive various fees like that. We'll say also kind of depends on how good the negotiations are going on the partnership fees with the HFC for the participation of the partnership. So it's really kind of up to city's determination of how much they're willing to give to create this housing.
All right. Well, I just want to thank Jeff. When he looked at me and said Judge Garza is going to build, I thought you were going to say courthouse. But I wanted to make comparison. So this Housing Finance Corporation, it's taken off the taxes, so we're not collecting. But a housing authority, that's a straight up burden. We're paying for something, right?
So a housing authority is tax exempt as well.
Okay.
And a housing authority also has the additional social services burden in terms of providing social services to the residents within the housing authority.
So it's a burden.
Okay. So that would be a burden on the local government or on the housing authority to fund
My experience, and I'm not a housing expert, I don't wanna act like I am. My most recent experience was when we tore down 569 units of public housing in Galveston after Hurricane Ida. Housing Authority, it became a civil war battle between the fair housing advocates, the Housing Authority, and the state. When it was rebuilt, they decided that they were gonna basically contract it to a third party, which was the best decision that was ever made. Because now the third party is responsible for managing it. They created a mixed income development. And as part of the deal, the developer provided a number of social service amenities. But it does create a burden with regard to additional services that are needed in the community that I think we need to be extremely mindful of.
All right. Any other questions? Great. Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
That's it, right? Thank you, city, for hosting this, and I appreciate that we get to hear the same message on the same meeting. They're not 2 meetings with us, 2 meetings with you. Thank you, Jeff.
The only thing I would ask is, whatever consideration you all have, next steps with regard to, the Lynn Development Project, next steps with whether or not you want to talk more about a housing finance corporation. If I've been trying to coordinate with the county judge, the mayor, and the city manager, just as a small group to kind of see if it even made any sense. But if that could be shared with me at some point, and we're happy to facilitate continuing to try and have these types of dialogues to evaluate.
Sounds good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And for the benefit of the folks sitting out there saying, what are they doing now? You need to know that it takes action by the Commissioners Court, the City Council. This doesn't happen without you knowing it, and the newspaper writing about it and so forth. So don't think that there's a lot of things that we have to study and look at. I mean, they're looking at some of the material I got today. It's a little bit new to me too, like it is to some of our commissioners. But it does give us an opportunity to look at the possibility of getting housing for people, that get people back into our town that left because of the hurricane and they didn't have a place to live and can't afford to find one right now. And that is important to us too. So thank you for being here. If no one has anything else, I would entertain a motion to
adjourn.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? We're adjourned.
That's it.